Hi everyone, it's Vivi. Today I wanted to talk about the state of an Infinity Nikki since a 1.5 update, and the backlash that Infold received for this update, and a few other things. So as you know, Infold hyped up the 1.5 update as being the biggest one yet, and that unlike previous updates, there would be no broken promises. Well, the launch of 1.5 for a lot of fans was probably the biggest letdown of all for a variety of reasons, so let's dig into some of the complaints. I'm going to first start with the story, so if you are not interested in getting spoilers or anything like that, please skip this section and go to the next one. But seriously, there's going to be spoilers, so if you haven't already, skip. So if you're still here, then let's talk about the story pre 1.5. In the original opening scene, you are introduced to Nikki and Momo, who are about ready to go to Nikki's graduation ball, and they are looking for a dress. And it's pretty cool. On second rewatch, I just noticed that they introduced both the floating and the purification outfit in this scene, which is kind of a nice little Easter egg for folks who are going back to rewatch it. A little while later, Nikki discovers a red dress in a closet, which then promptly whisks her to a new world via a portal, where she meets Ina, the curator, who gives her some cryptic message about the world's ball coming to a close and how she used to dance with the owner of the dress a long time ago. And she also kind of forces the Heart of Infinity on Nikki in order to save Mirrorland. Once Nikki gets the Heart of Infinity, Ina teleports her away to Mirrorland, where you then learn how to play with a fairly guided tutorial as you find the different ability outfits. So you learn how to jump, you learn how to float, and you learn how to purify S-Lings. It's a really organic opening scene and start of the game as you get a good grasp of the story, Nikki and Momo, what's at stake, various NPC introductions, how to play the game, and so on. Now let's compare this to the new opening scene, which shows that the world is already collapsing, the sky shatters, and instead of getting the Heart of Infinity, you already have it on you from all your previous attempts at saving the world. And there's really no explanation as to what the heck is going on. You do meet the mysterious seer who just tells you the world is collapsing and that you need to get to the Sea of Stars, but outside of that, it's still kind of confusing. Now, as a player who came from the pre-1.5 update, I already know how to play the game, I already know how to float and all of that stuff, and I'm not really sure what new players are experiencing with the tutorial, but if it's the same as pre-1.4 players, the tutorial is severely lacking. Instead of the more organic nature of the tutorial that you had pre-1.5, where you find the ability outfits and it kind of gives you an update on how to use it, you just have the seer kind of giving you instruction and like, all right, jump over this. Okay, now use your floating ability. And it's like, well, for new players, like how the heck do you use your new floating ability? If it's different for new players and there's actually a pop-up, please let me know in the comments below. What really angered a lot of players is the change in two fan favorites, Ina and Giovanni. Essentially, Ina played a huge part in the original intro by basically giving Nikki the Heart of Infinity, and later on, the pattern for the Silver Gale's aria. Now, she also was a huge part of the advertisement of Infinity Nikki when the game first came out. So a lot of people kind of fell in love with her. She had a very cool look. She was chained up. So, you know, a lot of people wanted to find out her story and what her deal was. Now, she kind of shows up for about 2 seconds and is kind of like, oh yeah, I remember you. The world's ending. Go forth and go save it. The end. So she has a much more limited scope in this. Meanwhile, Giovanni, who played a huge part in the pre-1.5 storyline, like the original main storyline, it was basically brushed off as oh, he's just confused. His wish turned him into a monster in a different timeline that was destroyed, but he still has some residual memories. And it kind of gets rid of the core component of the story pre-1.5. Kind of gets rid of all that emotional impact of Giovanni and what happened to him, and it's really a slap in the face for players who are heavily invested in this poor doomed guy. What will happen to him? Who knows? Will he come back? I don't know. It just seems his whole storyline, everything about it, with the Fey Wish, with the PCs, with the bottle, the Orium vase, and all of that, and his wish, it just falls flat. And what about Momo? I mean, he is there in the beginning, the pre-1.5 opening scene, and now he doesn't show up until after the initial scene, and then he just kind of blinks into existence. This is a character who was meant to be your best friend, your closest companion, and he's not there with you anymore until 30 minutes into the game. And then there's the introduction of this idea that this is not the first time that Nikki has tried to save Maryland. We don't know how many failures she's had, but it sure seems like a lot. And knowing that it is the nth time, or however, the 10th, the 50th, the 1000th, whatever the number is, kind of destroys any kind of emotional connection you might have with the NPCs and the stories, because, I mean, do they really matter if the world's most likely going to be destroyed? If you can just reset the world and go back, who cares about this weird coma problem? Who cares about the people? Who cares about any of this storyline? Now, it's too early to tell, but a lot of longtime Nikki fans seem to believe that the Seer is potentially a corrupted Nikki, maybe tainted by an out-of-control Heart of Infinity, or maybe just detached from time and space, and just seeing the world destroyed thousands of times just kind of made her dissociate essentially from her emotions. It's hard to tell, but hopefully there will be more story that comes along to clarify. The Star of Sea's location, at the very least, certainly feeds into the concept that there are multiple worlds and Nikkis that can exist in the same time and place. And while that's just kind of a story front for the multiplayer aspect, it certainly does make the theory that the Seer is Nikki, or could potentially be Nikki, much more compelling. Outside of the story, there are plenty of other complaints about 1.5, the biggest being just the ridiculous amount of bugs. A lot of people just were not able to log into the game for days. Some people had issues for a full week because of bugs for mobile and PC and PlayStation. And then there's just like the standard bugs you get for live service games since they try to push out these updates so quickly. But on top of everything else, it really upset a lot of players. Multiplayer is notoriously buggy and laggy. The Sea of Stars is essentially the multiplayer hub, and while plenty of people do love the way it looks, there's plenty of great photo op that you can have, there's just not really any content to it. Sure, there's the daily quests that you get to get specific materials to get this Darcy dress, but after you're done, there's really no reason to stay in the location. The mini games are lacking and low effort. There's an animal playtime mini game, which is basically literally just you and other Nikkis transforming into animals and walking slowly around in that little square, and that's it. There's the seesaw, which is, well, just a seesaw, and it doesn't have any interesting mechanics in it. And then, I mean, yeah, sure, you can run around with another Nikki and stuff like that, but it's just, there's nothing there. There's nothing to do, which is really unfortunate. And there's also the Swish and Stitch soiree, which is on Serenity Island, but it's kind of pointless. There's a 2-hour span of time where you can enter into it to earn rewards, and there'll be a specific theme that you need to follow in order to get the rewards. Outside of that, you can still participate, but you're not going to get anything out of it, unfortunately. And once you're done with all the rewards and things like that, there's really no reason to go to the Swish and Stitch soiree. It's just kind of there. I mean, it's kind of cute the first couple times seeing Nikki, you know, do the runway walk, and you can choose what poses she does at the end, but there's very little interactivity here, and I'm really hoping that they do introduce something else, whether that's like PvP battles with other Nikkis or something else. Another big feature that they kind of hyped up in the 1.3 update and the live stream of 1.5 was the dying feature. In 1.3, during the Bulquet Care Day, they introduced dying and said that it was kind of a sneak peek at what was to come. If you weren't able to play that update, you would combine different collectible materials from the world to create different dye for the Bulquet. And so obviously, since they said it was a sneak peek, everybody assumed that this was how the dyeing feature was going to work when it was released. And of course, a lot of people also assumed that the dyeing would somehow be tied into a storyline for Stoneville, since there is a literal dye workshop there, and then they make these fabrics, and there's a big storyline in the actual main quest that introduces all of these features. So, the expectations were high, and people were thinking that, hey, we're introducing this feature, it would make sense, lore-wise, to have it attached to this place. Unfortunately, the reality is that there is no story associated with dyeing. All you need to do is go to your wardrobe and then click a item and you will have the ability to dye it. That's it. In order to unlock additional palettes that are not auto unlocked, you need to spend a new currency called Rainbow Prisms. While you can earn some for free, it does cost quite a bit of prisms to unlock the full palettes, especially for 4 and 5-star outfits. Now, more importantly, when you unlock a palette, it is only for a single piece, not for the whole outfit. So let's say you have a 5-star outfit, you unlock the palette for the hair, it's only for the hair. If you want it for the gloves or anything else, you need to unlock those as well, which ends up costing a lot of prisms and ultimately a lot of money. And don't get me started on the actual dyeing process. The colors you see on the palette will not actually reflect those same colors on the actual pieces. They all change based on the base color of whatever item you're dyeing. You might think you're getting some nice green color, and then when you actually put it on the hair, it's gonna be a teal or some other color. That means you need to click through every single palette that you have open in order to find the color that you want. And of course, there is still the issue where the colors in the wardrobe look different in the actual world due to the various saturation, lighting, all of that good stuff that's different between the wardrobe and the world. However, probably the biggest source of outrage was the fact that the 2 new banner pulls had 11 pieces instead of the standard 10, and it was not communicated at all to people until after the fact. Now, why does this matter? It matters because now the hard pity to guarantee you get all of the pieces is 220 pulls, whereas previous ones for 10-piece outfits would be 200. Now, it might not sound like much, but that's an extra 20 pulls, so if you want to get the final evolution, that's an extra 40 pulls that you need to do to get all of the pieces. The lack of communication was a huge issue, and then Infold issued an apology, which really set people off because it basically said, hey, sorry we didn't communicate to you that this was going to be 11 pieces. Next time, if there are future outfits that are more than 10 pieces, we'll let you know, which just led to fans deciding to do basically boycotting Infold by not either doing pulls, not spending money, just not playing the game, whatever it was. So some of the demands that people are having for this boycott kind of broken down into 4 basic sections. So the first one is an implementation of beta testing to ensure fewer bugs and stability across all platforms. The second one is to restore the original story content to ensure the intro of the Sea of Stars is integrated in a way that both aligns and enhances the narrative. The third one is to maintain a 180 to 200 pity rate and have a max of 10-piece outfits. And then the fourth one is for the craftable dye to deliver on the feature promoted in the 1.3 bullquet preview and allow for players to craft dye resources. So these are all fairly reasonable asks. I think whether Infold actually does it or not is another story. Seems like they've probably gone too far into this, at least for the dye and the original story content. I highly doubt that they will bring that back. Now, in terms of the 180 to 200 pity rate, that is something that they can roll back relatively easily, as well as the implementation of beta testing. Now, that's something that will cost them more money and will potentially push their updates to a longer schedule. Whether they're willing to do that or not is up to them, and if it seems like it will make financial sense. It's not all bad though. So in addition to the Sea of Stars, there's also the release of Serenity Island, which is a completely separate island that is part of the PC storyline. This actually has a storyline that is somewhat related to the main quest, kind of. And while the boss was pretty easy, it is definitely a much fuller experience in the Sea of Stars. There's other NPCs, there's actually quests, there's a storyline, there's plenty to do and a lot of things to find. There's more chests to find, there's whim bubbles that you can collect, and there's also, they're not called Dews of Inspiration, I forgot what they were called, but there's similar things to collect. So there's a lot more to do here, and it seems like this was meant to be the 1.5 update. What is interesting to me, though, is that there's a lot of references here to Silvergale and rainbows and all of that all throughout the main storyline of Serenity Island. Now, just Serenity Island, the quests there are all permanent, so they are meant to be part of the main story. But yeah, so there's a lot of references to Silvergale throughout the entire thing, and it made me think that, you know, we would be using the Silvergale aria for something. Maybe we would summon a rainbow for some purpose to help out the PCs, but no such luck. I'm not sure if this was changed partway through, or, you know, if they decided that maybe having a gate for the story for something like the Silvergate aria, which had a pretty high grind for the bolding materials, you know, was too much for new players. But either way, it seemed like a missed opportunity. And instead of having the Silvergale aria, instead we get to see the Crimson Feather in a part of the storyline. So not sure what happened there, not sure what the decision-making process was. Seemed like they were just trying to push the banner once again in the story, and it seemed just kind of like a hastily added feature. For me personally, I've kind of stopped playing Infinity Nikki every day. I still play it. I did enjoy Serenity Island. I still haven't finished up all the quests or the limited time events there, which I need to do to get all the diamonds and stuff, but you know, in previous updates, I would just burn through those quests and those events quickly, like within the first week, and I've just kind of been taking my time with it. I don't know if it's just that I'm getting bored, or if these updates, if the 1.5 update actually did kind of put me off, but either way, I'm definitely not playing as much, and I'm definitely not putting in money. So I used to get the monthly pass, and I would occasionally get the Distant Anthem, and since then, you know, the update, I haven't put any money into it at all. I do think Infold made a lot of blunders in this update. I think they probably should have just stuck with Serenity Island for this update and maybe fleshed out that story a bit more instead of trying to do both multiplayer and Serenity Island. Multiplayer is a tough task for any company, especially if it's something that you're adding at a later date and something that you're trying to push as a live service. There's a lot of things that can go wrong and did go wrong with the Infinity Nikki multiplayer. So I feel like they should have kept that for 1.6 or 1.7, something later, just so that we could then focus on Serenity Island. So anyway, that's it for this video. If you have any comments, please leave them below. You know I love hearing from you. And if you could please like, share, comment, subscribe, it really helps me out. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video. Bye.